A Dog of Flanders, Nello and Patrashe were left all alone in the world. They were friends in a friendship closer than brotherhood. Nello was a little underworld. Patrashe was a big Fleming. They were both of the same age by length of years, yet one was still young and the other was already old. They had dwelt together almost all their days. Both were orphaned and destitute, and owed their lives to the same hand. It had been the beginning of the tie between them, their first bond of sympathy, and it had strengthened day by day and had grown with their growth, firm and indissoluble, until they loved one another very greatly. Their home was a little hut on the edge of a little village, a Flemish village, a league from Antwerp, set amidst flat breadth of pasture and cornlands with long lines of poplars and of alders bending in the breeze on the edge of the great canal which ran through it. It had about a score of houses and homesteads with shutters of bright green or sky blue, and roofs rose red or black and white, and walls whitewashed until they shone in the sun like snow. In the center of the village stood a windmill, placed on a little moss-grown slope. It was a landmark to all that level country road. It had once been painted scarlet, sails and all, but that had been in its infancy, half a century or more earlier, when it had ground wheat for the soldier of Napoleon. And it was now a ruddy brown, tanned by wind and water. It went cruelly by fits and starts, as though rheumatic and stiff in the joints from age. But it served the whole neighborhood, which would have thought it almost as impious to carry grain elsewhere as to attend any other religious service than the mass that was performed at the altar of the little old grey church, with its conical steeple, which stood opposite to it, and whose single bell rang morning, noon, and night, with that strange, subdued, hollow sadness which every bell that hangs in the Low Countries seems to gain as an integral part of its melody. Within sound of the little melancholy clock, almost from their birth upward, they had dwelt together, Nello and Patrashe, in the little hut on the edge of the village, with the cathedral spire of Antwerp rising in the northeast. Beyond the great green plain of seeding grass and spreading corn that stretched away from them like a tideless, changeless sea, it was the hut of a very old man, of a very poor man, of old Jehan Das, who in his time had been a soldier, and who remembered the wars that had trampled the country as oxen tread down the furrows, and who had brought from his service nothing except a wound which had made him a cripple. When old Jehan Das had reached his full 80, his daughter had died in the Ardennes, hard by Stavelot, and had left him in legacy her 2-year-old son. The old man could ill contrive to support himself, but he took up the additional burden uncomplainingly, and it soon became welcome and precious to him. Little Nello, which was but a pet diminutive for Nicolas, throve with him, and the old man and the little child lived in the poor little hut contentedly. It was a very humble little mud hut indeed, but it was clean and white as a seashell, and stood in a small plot of garden ground that yielded beans and herbs and pumpkins. They were very poor, terrible poor. Many a day they had nothing at all to eat. They never by any chance had enough. To have had enough to eat would have been to have reached paradise at once. But the old man was very gentle and good to the boy, and the boy was a beautiful, innocent, truthful, tender-hearted creature, and they were happy on a crust and a few leaves of cabbage, and asked no more of earth or heaven, save indeed that Patrashe should be always with them, since without Patrashe, where would they have been? For Patrashe was their Alpha and Omega, the treasury and granary, the store of gold and wound of wealth, the breadwinner and minister, their only friend and comforter. Patrashe, dead or gone from them, they must have laid themselves down and died likewise. Patrashe was body, brains, hands, head, and feet to both of them. Patrashe was their very life, their very soul. For Jehandas was old and crippled, and Nello was but a child, and Patrashe was their dog. A dog of Flanders, yellow or hide, large of head and limb, with wolf-like ears that stood erect, and legs bowed and feet widened in the muscular development wrought in his breed by many generations of hard service. Patrashe came of a race which had toiled hard and cruelly from sire to son in Flanders many a century. Slaves of slaves, dogs of the people, beasts of the shafts and the harness, creatures that lived straining their sinews in the gall of the cart and died breaking their hearts on the flints of the streets. Patrashe had been born of parents who had labored hard all their days over the sharp-set stones of the various cities, and the long, shadowless, weary roads of the two Flanders and of Brabant. He had been born to no other heritage than those of pain and of toil. He had been fed on crusts and baptized with blows. Why not? It was a Christian country, and Patrashe was but a dog. Before he was fully grown, he had known the bitter gall of the cart and the collar. Before he had entered his 13th month, he had become the property of a hardware dealer who was accustomed to wander over the land north and south, from the blue sea to the green mountains. They sold him for a small price because he was so young. This man was a drunkard and a brute. The life of Patrashe was a life of hell. To deal the tortures of hell on the animal creation is a way which the Christians have of showing the belief in it. His purchaser was a solemn, ill-living, brutal Barbatonese, who heaped his cart full with pots and pans and flagons and buckets and other wares of crockery and brass and tin, and left Patrashe to draw the load as best he might, whilst he himself lounged idly by the side in a fat and sluggish ease, smoking his black pipe and stopping at every wine shop or cafe on the road. Happily for Patrashe, or unhappily, he was very strong. He came of an iron race, long born and bred to such cruel travail, so that he did not die, but managed to drag on a wretched existence under the brutal burdens, the sacrificing lashes, the hunger, the thirst, the blows, the curses, and the exhaustion, which are the only wages with which the Franks repaid the most patient and laborious of all the four-footed victims.